Flames burned across its metal hull as it cut through the icy sky of Sci-Fi 9, a frozen world far beyond any charted system. Inside, alarms blared. Red warning lights flashed, casting a glow over the terrified crew. Captain Ethan Vance gritted his teeth, gripping the armrests of his command chair. The Frontier Dawn, Earth's first deep space colony ship, was going down. "Brace for impact," Ethan shouted. The crew held on as the ship crashed into the planet's surface. The impact was brutal. Metal screeched. Ice cracked. Then, silence. For a moment, Ethan's vision blurred. His body ached. His fingers were numb. But he was alive. He unbuckled his harness and turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Sarah Briggs. "Report," he ordered. Sarah coughed, rubbing her forehead where a cut dripped blood. "Hull is breached. Engines offline. We're stuck." She checked her scanner. Oxygen levels are stable, but outside temperatures are terrible. -70 degrees. Ethan exhaled sharply. They were stranded on an ice world. A harsh reality. The surviving crew, about 20 people, gathered in the control room. Their faces were pale, eyes filled with fear. "We won't last long in this cold," said Dr. Patel, the ship's medical officer. "Hypothermia will set in within hours." Ethan rubbed his temples. They had emergency supplies, but no long-term solution. The ship was not designed for this kind of extreme cold. "We need to find shelter," Ethan said. "Something better than this broken ship." Sarah frowned. "Captain, there's something else." The scanners picked up a structure not far from here. Ethan's eyes widened. "A structure? As in an alien building?" Sarah nodded. "Could be ruins. Could be something else. But it's our only lead." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Humans had never found intelligent life before. If this structure belonged to an alien race, what had happened to them? "Gear up," Ethan ordered. "We're checking it out." The alien ruins. The planet's surface was a frozen wasteland. Icy winds howled through the dark sky. The crew wore thick survival suits, but even then, the cold bit into their bones. After an hour of struggling through knee-deep snow, they reached the structure. It was massive, half-buried in ice, clearly not human-made. "Captain," Sarah whispered, "we're not the first ones here." Ethan followed her gaze. Near the entrance, a shipwreck lay in ruins. Not Earth technology. An alien craft. The crew tensed. Was something, still here? "Stay alert," Ethan said, stepping forward. They entered the building. Inside, the temperature was slightly warmer, but still freezing. The walls were covered in strange markings, glowing faintly. Snow piled in the corners. This place had been abandoned for a long time. Then they heard it. A low growl. Weapons were drawn. Flashlights swept across the icy chamber. Something was moving in the darkness. Then, from the shadows, it appeared. A tall, blue-skinned alien, dressed in tattered armor, with piercing yellow eyes. He looked half dead, his body shivering violently from the cold. Yet, despite his weakened state, his expression was full of hatred. Ethan raised a hand. "We don't want to fight. We just want shelter." The alien bared his teeth. "You, humans." His voice was deep, accented. "You shouldn't be here." Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle. "You know what we are." The alien coughed, barely standing. "I know everything about you." Ethan took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" The alien hesitated, then spoke. "Varun, exile of the Therixai Empire." The name meant nothing to Ethan. But one word stood out. Exile. This alien wasn't just a survivor. He had been left here to die. Varun swayed, his legs giving out. He was collapsing. Before Ethan could react, the alien hit the ground, shivering violently. His breath was shallow. Dr. Petal rushed forward. "Captain, he's dying. His body isn't built for this cold." Ethan frowned. This wasn't their problem. They barely had enough warmth to survive themselves. But then, Varun's ship, this building, his knowledge. They needed him. Help him, Ethan said. Dr. Patil quickly wrapped Varun in a thermal blanket. The alien barely reacted, his body trembling. Then, in a weak, hoarse voice, he whispered something that made everyone freeze. "Stop talking, human. We're freezing. Into my bed now." The crew stared. Sarah coughed. Did he just? Dr. Patil shook her head. It's not what you think. His species, they survive cold through physical contact. Without body heat, he won't last the night. Ethan exhaled. This just kept getting worse. Then, reluctantly, he sighed. Fine. We do what we must to survive. Varun's eyelids fluttered, and for the first time, his voice was less hostile. Maybe humans aren't as weak as I thought. The air inside the alien ruin was freezing. The walls were made of dark metal, covered in strange symbols that pulsed with a faint blue light. Ice had formed along the floor, and the temperature was just slightly better than the deadly cold outside. Varun, the blue-skinned alien, lay weakly on the floor, wrapped in a thermal blanket. His body trembled, his breathing shallow. He was on the verge of freezing to death. Ethan Vance, the human captain, looked down at him, then at his own crew. They were all cold, exhausted, and unsure about what to do next. Then Varun spoke in a hoarse voice. "Stop talking, human. We're freezing. Into my bed now." For a moment, there was silence. Lieutenant Sarah Briggs coughed. Did he just say? Dr. Patil interrupted. It's not what you think. His species needs body heat to survive. Without it, he'll die. Ethan sighed. This was getting worse by the second. They were stranded, freezing, and now they had to cuddle with an alien just to keep him alive. But Varun had information. He had been exiled here, which meant he knew more about this world than they did. If they left him to die, they might lose their only chance of survival. Ethan rubbed his temples. Fine. We do what we have to. He knelt beside Varun and carefully pulled the thermal blanket tighter. The alien's skin was ice-cold to the touch. He was shivering violently, his muscles barely responding. You better not bite, Ethan muttered. Varun didn't reply. He was too weak to argue. Strange allies. The night passed slowly. Ethan, Sarah, and 2 other crew members took turns staying close to Varun, sharing their body heat to keep him alive. It was uncomfortable, awkward, but necessary. By morning, the alien was no longer shivering. His breathing was steady. His yellow eyes slowly opened, scanning the humans around him. You actually helped me, he said in a quiet voice. Ethan stood up, stretching his sore muscles. Of course, we're not the kind of people who let someone freeze to death. Varun stared at him for a long moment, then let out a small breath. Humans are strange. Sarah crossed her arms. We saved your life. Maybe try saying thank you. Varun hesitated, then nodded slightly. I will not forget this. Ethan crouched beside him. Now it's your turn to help us. You've been here longer than us. You must know something about this planet. Varun sat up slowly, still weak but recovering. I do. And if you want to survive, you need me. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Why? Varun glanced at the ruin around them. Because Sci-Fi 9 is not just a frozen wasteland. It's a death trap. Secrets of Sci-Fi 9. The crew gathered around as Varun explained. This planet was once a Therexy outpost, he said. But long ago, it was abandoned. My people left me here to die, thinking nothing could survive. Sarah frowned. But something does survive here, doesn't it? Varun nodded. Yes, the cold is not the only danger. There are creatures, hunters beneath the ice. A chill ran through the room, and it wasn't from the temperature. What kind of creatures? Ethan asked. Varun's yellow eyes darkened. I do not know what they are called, but they are massive. They live beneath the frozen ground, sensing movement above. When something walks too long in one place, they come. Ethan exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. Their crew had walked across the ice to get here. Had they already drawn attention? How do we avoid them? Sarah asked. Va Ruan looked serious. We must keep moving, and we must stay off the ice as much as possible. Dr. Petal looked uneasy. And where do we go? Va Ruan hesitated, then sighed. There is an old Therexe bunker, deeper in the mountains. It has power. It has shelter. But reaching it will be dangerous. Ethan nodded. Then that's our new mission. We head for the bunker before the ice monsters come knocking. A cold deal. Ethan turned to Varun. You know the way. You help us reach that bunker, and we'll help you survive. Varun's eyes narrowed. And after that? Ethan shrugged. We'll figure it out. Varun studied him carefully, then finally nodded. Agreed. But one warning, human. If you betray me, I will not hesitate to leave you behind. Ethan smirked. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. Varun gave a small chuckle. Perhaps humans are not as weak as my people believed. Sarah sighed. Great. Now let's just hope we don't get eaten before we reach this bunker. The journey begins. With their uneasy alliance formed, the group prepared to leave. They gathered supplies, packed rations, and equipped what little weapons they had left. As they stepped out into the freezing wasteland, Ethan took one last look at the alien ruin behind them. A part of him had a bad feeling. This planet had already tried to kill them once. And now, they were going deeper into the unknown. The wind howled like a living creature, sharp as knives against the thick survival suits of the human crew. Ethan Vance pulled his hood tighter, leading his team through the endless frozen wasteland. The ice beneath their boots cracked occasionally, sending uneasy shivers through the group. Beside him, Varun, the blue-skinned alien exile, moved with careful steps. His yellow eyes scanned the horizon with a deep wariness that made Ethan nervous. How far is this bunker of yours? Sarah Briggs asked, rubbing her gloved hands together. Varun pointed toward the distant mountains, barely visible through the thick snowstorm. There, 2 days if we move fast. Ethan exhaled slowly. 2 days in this frozen nightmare. They didn't have a choice. The shipwreck wouldn't keep them alive much longer, and staying still meant death. Then something else started to bother him. The silence. Too quiet. The wind blew, but there were no other sounds. No distant cracks of ice shifting. No echoes of falling snow. It was unnatural. And that's when Varun whispered, "We must move faster." Ethan glanced at him. Why? Varun's voice was low, urgent. They are listening. The hunters beneath. The group picked up their pace, moving as quickly as they could without slipping. Every step sent a fresh wave of fear through Ethan's chest. Then, crack. Everyone froze. The sound had come from below them. Ethan swallowed hard, gripping his rifle. Tell me that was normal. Varun's expression darkened. No, that was them. Dr. Patel's voice shook. Them. Varun didn't blink. The things beneath the ice. Then the ground shifted. Not an earthquake. Not a normal tremor. The ice moved, as if something massive was swimming beneath it. Then another crack, louder. Sarah cursed. Run. The chase begins. The crew ran. Ethan's heart pounded as he sprinted over the ice, his breath fogging up his visor. The ground beneath them shook, the movements growing stronger. Then behind them, the ice exploded. A monstrous, jagged claw burst through, coated in frozen spikes. It was nearly 10 feet long, swiping wildly as something massive tried to crawl up from below. The crew barely dodged the attack. What the hell is that? One of the engineers, Davis, screamed. Varun didn't answer. He was already pulling out a small alien device, a glowing sphere that flickered with strange symbols. He pressed it, and a pulse of energy rippled through the ice. The creature screeched. The noise was deafening, a mix of metal grinding and ice shattering. Then, with a violent crash, it retreated back into the frozen depths. For a long moment, there was only silence. The crew panted, trying to catch their breath. Ethan turned to Varun. What was that? Varun tucked the device away. They are called Vorak. They hunt by sensing movement above them. You step in one place too long, they come. Sarah wiped the sweat from her forehead, despite the freezing cold. And you decided to mention this now. Varun's expression remained unreadable. Would you have believed me before seeing it yourself? No one had an answer to that. Danger at every step. The group moved carefully now, stepping lightly, avoiding any sudden movements. The Vorak had retreated, but the feeling of being watched never left. Ethan walked beside Varun, watching him closely. You knew about them. You had a weapon against them. How? Varun hesitated, then sighed. The Vorak are not natural. They were created. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Created? By who? Varun's voice was grim. By my people, the Therexai Empire. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Patel frowned. Wait, you mean your species made those things? Varun nodded. Yes, bioweapons, designed to eliminate enemies without wasting resources. We tested them on frozen worlds like this one, but they were too dangerous. They turned on us. Ethan clenched his jaw. So your empire left them here, just dumped them on this planet. Varun's expression was hard to read. Yes, and then they left me here too. For the first time, Ethan saw something beneath Varun's cold, warrior-like demeanor, something like regret. But there was no time to discuss it, because up ahead, something else waited for them. A dark shape in the snow, a structure, the bunker, the dead warning. The crew reached the entrance of the old Therexai bunker. It was huge, built into the side of a frozen cliff. The doors were partially open, covered in layers of ice. Looks abandoned, Sarah murmured. Varun stepped forward, brushing off the snow. It should still have power. Ethan motioned for everyone to be careful. Something felt wrong. He could feel it in his gut. Then they saw it. Just outside the entrance, half buried in ice, was a Therexai skeleton. It was huge, its armor cracked open, its body frozen in a twisted position. And on the metal door, scratched deep into the surface, were 3 alien symbols. Varun read them aloud. His voice was quiet, but filled with warning. Do not enter. The crew tensed. Ethan exhaled, his breath visible in the cold air. Well, that's not a good sign. Sarah sighed. We came all this way. We're not turning back now. Varun's yellow eyes locked onto Ethan's. Then prepare yourselves, human, because whatever killed them may still be inside. Ethan nodded, gripping his weapon. They had no choice but to go forward. And with that, the crew stepped into the darkness of the bunker. The bunker loomed before them, its entrance dark and uninviting. The ice-covered metal doors had been forced open long ago, leaving a jagged gap wide enough for a person to slip through. Snow had piled up at the entrance, and the freezing wind howled through the cracks, making an eerie whistling sound. Ethan Vance took a slow breath, gripping his rifle tighter. His crew stood behind him, tense and silent. They all saw the warning scratched into the metal. Do not enter. Yet, they had no choice. The Vorak beneath the ice were waiting outside, and their ship was lost. This bunker was their only hope of survival. Varun, the blue-skinned alien exile, stepped forward. He ran his fingers over the old Therexai symbols carved into the metal. His yellow eyes darkened. This was once a military station, he murmured, built to study something. Sarah Briggs frowned. Something. Varun's jaw tightened. I do not know what, but whatever it was, my people left in a hurry, and they left this message behind. Ethan exhaled sharply. Well, let's hope they just forgot to lock up when they left. No one laughed. Ethan turned to his crew. Weapons ready. Stay close. We move in fast and quiet. Then, with careful steps, they entered the darkness. Inside the forgotten station, the bunker's interior was dead silent. Ethan's boots crunched softly against the ice-covered floor as he moved through the entrance tunnel. The walls were lined with strange machinery, covered in frost and rust. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows. Sarah checked a power terminal on the wall. She wiped away the ice and frowned. Still getting a weak energy signal. That's a good sign, Ethan said. We might be able to get heat and lights running. Varun, however, didn't look relieved. He walked slowly, his eyes scanning every shadow. His alien instincts told him something was wrong. Dr. Patel stopped beside a control panel, tapping at a frozen screen. If we restore power, we can access the main logs. Maybe figure out what happened here. Do it, Ethan said. Patel nodded and got to work. Meanwhile, Sarah and Davis pried open a nearby weapons locker. Inside, they found old Therexi rifles covered in frost. Davis picked one up. Think these still work? Varun studied them. If they have power cells, yes. Sarah found a small glowing device and pressed it. The rifle in Davis' hands hummed to life. Davis grinned. Now that's what I'm talking about. Ethan smirked. Good. We might need them. Then Patel gasped. I got something. A warning from the past. The bunker's ancient security logs flickered onto the frozen screen. The recordings were distorted, the voices broken by static. Then, a deep voice came through. A Therexi officer. This is Commander Jaruk. If anyone hears this, the station is compromised. Static. Then more words. The experiment. It escaped. It killed my men. We tried to seal it in the lower levels, but it's learning. It's hunting us. If you find this message. There was a long pause. Then, in a whisper, the officer said, Do not enter. The screen flickered. End of log. A heavy silence filled the room. Sarah swallowed. Well, that's not creepy at all. Davis looked around nervously. So, did they lock the experiment inside? Varun's expression was grim. If they did, then we are standing inside its cage. Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. We don't have a choice. We need to restore full power. Maybe there's another message that tells us what we're dealing with. Patel hesitated, then nodded and continued working on the panel. Then, a sound. A soft scraping noise echoed through the hallway beyond. The crew froze. Ethan raised his weapon. Did anyone else hear that? Sarah nodded slowly, gripping her rifle. Yeah, and it came from inside the bunker. Something is here. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the lights flickered. A dull, metallic thump echoed from the far corridor. Then another. Varun whispered, We are not alone. Ethan motioned for the crew to stay close. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with. He activated his helmet scanner, but the readings were strange. The air was too cold, disrupting the sensors. Sarah switched on a thermal scanner and aimed it at the hallway ahead. I've got something. Ethan leaned closer. What is it? Sarah adjusted the settings. Her face paled. It's moving. The crew tensed, weapons aimed at the dark hallway. Then, a shadow shifted at the edge of the scanner's range. Something tall. Something watching them. The scraping sound came again, closer this time. Varun whispered, It knows we are here. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. Then we better be ready. A moment of silence passed. Then, from the darkness, came a low growl. And the hunt began. The air inside the bunker felt heavier now, thick with tension. The crew stood frozen, weapons raised, listening to the sound in the darkness. Something was there, watching, waiting. Ethan Vance's grip tightened around his rifle. His breath was slow, controlled. His heart, however, pounded like a war drum in his chest. Sarah Briggs kept her thermal scanner aimed at the hallway ahead. The blurry shape on the screen moved. Slow, calculating, intelligent. Then the growl came again. Closer. "We need to move," Ethan whispered. "Now." Varun nodded. "If it is hunting us, standing still makes us prey." Dr. Patel's hands shook as she adjusted the panel. "I almost have full power online. Just a few more seconds." Ethan cursed under his breath. They didn't have a few more seconds. Then, a sudden explosion of movement. The first attack. From the darkness, a blur of motion lunged forward. Ethan barely had time to react before something massive crashed into the group. Sarah screamed as she was knocked backward, her scanner flying from her hands. Davis fired his rifle wildly, the bright blue energy blasts flashing in the dark. Ethan rolled onto his back and aimed, but the creature was already gone. It moved too fast, disappearing back into the shadows. "Everyone, regroup," Ethan shouted. He pulled Sarah to her feet while Varun covered them with his weapon. Davis panted. "Dewey, what was that?" "I barely saw it." Varun's eyes glowed slightly in the dim light. "A predator. It is testing us, studying us." Sarah checked her scanner, her face pale. "It's circling us." Ethan's stomach tightened. They were being hunted. Then, suddenly, the bunker's power surged back online. Lights flickered to life, emergency alarms blared, and the security doors slammed shut with a loud clang. Dr. Patel gasped. "I got the systems working." "Yeah," Ethan muttered, staring down the now fully lit hallway. "But I think we just locked ourselves inside with it. A better look at the enemy." With the lights on, the crew finally saw the bunker's true condition. The walls were scratched, deep claw marks gouged into the metal. The floor was littered with broken armor, shattered weapons, and frozen skeletons of Theraxi soldiers. Then Sarah aimed her scanner at the far end of the corridor. "There," she whispered. The creature stood in the open now, watching them. It was tall, almost 7 feet, its body covered in black, insect-like exoskeleton armor. Its limbs were long and sharp, ending in hooked claws that dripped with ice. Its head was elongated, with glowing blue eyes that burned with intelligence. It was a perfect hunter. A Vorak was terrifying. But this was something else. Varun inhaled sharply. "It has changed." Ethan frowned. "Changed." Varun nodded. "This is no ordinary Vorak. It has adapted. It has learned." The creature tilted its head slightly, then vanished in a blur of motion. Davis cursed. "It's fast. Too fast." Ethan took charge. "We're not dying here. We fight smart." Varun nodded. "Then we lead it to a place of our choosing." Sarah checked the bunker's map. "There's an armory ahead. We can set a trap." Ethan smirked. "Then let's make it chase us." The trap is set. The crew ran through the halls, their boots pounding against the metal floor. The creature followed. They could hear it, skittering, climbing, moving along the ceiling like a spider. Sarah marked the armory's entrance on her display. Almost there. Ethan turned and fired a warning shot down the hallway. The energy blast hit the wall, sending sparks flying. The creature let out a sharp, angry screech and charged after them. That got its attention. Ethan grinned. The crew slid into the armory just as the creature reached the doorway. Varun slammed his hand on a control panel, activating the security lockdown. The thick metal doors sealed shut with a loud boom. For a moment, silence. Then, the creature slammed into the door. Vam, vam. The metal dented inward as its claws tore at the steel. "It won't hold for long," Dr. Patel warned. Ethan scanned the room. "Then let's make sure we're ready when it gets through." The final stand begins. The armory was filled with Theraxi weapons and explosives. Varun grabbed a plasma grenade and tossed it to Ethan. "Use this when it charges. Sarah powered up a heavy energy cannon mounted to a tripod. This should slow it down. Davis armed himself with a shock rifle, nodding. All right, let's do this. Then, the door burst open. The creature roared and leaped into the room, claws slashing. Sarah fired the energy cannon. A bright blue blast hit the creature's side, sending it crashing against the wall. But it got up too fast. Davis shot his shock rifle, the electric bolts stunning it for only a moment. Varun moved with speed and precision, dodging an attack and slicing at the creature's exoskeleton with a Therixai energy blade. Ethan held the plasma grenade, waiting. The creature locked its glowing eyes on him in charge. Now, Varun shouted. Ethan threw the grenade just as the creature lunged. The explosion lit up the room, sending a shockwave through the bunker. When the smoke cleared, the creature lay motionless. The crew stood there, panting. Sarah coughed. Did we get it? Varun stared at the body. Then he whispered, No. Then, the creature's broken body twitched. Its wounds began to close, and its glowing blue eyes snapped open. Ethan's heart sank. Oh, hell. The silence in the armory lasted only a second. Then the creature moved. Its black exoskeleton twisted and reformed, closing the wounds left by the explosion. The plasma burns on its body faded as if they were never there. Its glowing blue eyes snapped toward Ethan and his crew. Davis took a step back. That thing just healed itself. Varun's hands clenched into fists. It is evolving, learning from every attack. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle. Then how do we kill it? The creature didn't wait for an answer. It attacked. A desperate fight. The creature lunged at Ethan first. He barely dodged in time, rolling to the side as its massive claws slashed through metal like it was paper. Sparks flew as the walls shattered under the impact. Sarah fired the heavy energy cannon again, hitting the creature square in the chest. The powerful blast sent it crashing into the armory shelves, knocking over weapons and supplies. But it stood up instantly. This time, its body absorbed the energy blast. The glowing veins along its arms pulsed brighter, as if it had grown even stronger. It's adapting. Dr. Patil gasped. It's absorbing our attacks. Davis fired his shock rifle, but the electricity had no effect anymore. The creature barely flinched. Varun's face darkened. Then we must stop attacking the way it expects. Ethan's mind raced. If they couldn't kill it with weapons, what else could they do? Then he saw something. A control panel on the far wall. An idea formed in his mind. A risky one. Varun, buy me some time. Ethan shouted, running toward the controls. Varun nodded. He grabbed a Therixai energy blade from the shelf and charged at the creature. The alien exile moved with inhuman speed, dodging and weaving between the monster's strikes. His blade flashed, cutting deep into the creature's joints. For the first time, the monster screeched in pain. Ethan didn't waste the chance. He reached the control panel and scanned the options. There, a thermal containment system. If he could activate it, he could turn the entire armory into a freezing trap. He quickly pressed a few buttons. The system whirred to life. Everyone, get ready to run, he yelled. The cold brings hope. The air inside the armory changed instantly. The lights flickered as cold vapor hissed from hidden vents. Sub-zero temperatures spread rapidly, freezing the metal surfaces in seconds. Sarah shivered. What did you do? Ethan smirked. I turned this room into a giant freezer. Let's see if it can heal through that. The creature stumbled. Its black exoskeleton, once invincible, now became sluggish. The freezing temperature slowed its movements, its glowing veins flickering like dying embers. Varun's eyes widened. Cold. It is weak to extreme cold. Davis grinned. Then let's turn up the AC. Dr. Patil quickly helped Ethan override the system, forcing the temperature even lower. The walls turned white with frost. Ice formed on the creature's body. It screeched, struggling to move. For the first time, it was vulnerable. Ethan didn't hesitate. Sarah, hit it with everything you got. Sarah fired the energy cannon one last time. The cold made the creature brittle. The blast shattered its exoskeleton, sending frozen pieces of its body flying across the room. The monster let out one final inhuman wail before collapsing. Its body cracked apart, frozen solid. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Davis exhaled. Is it dead? Varun stepped closer, inspecting the remains. After a few seconds, he finally nodded. Yes, the cold destroyed its ability to heal. Ethan let out a breath of relief. Good, because I was running out of ideas. Secrets of the bunker. With the creature dead, the crew could finally take a moment to breathe. Dr. Patel checked the bunker's main computer. Now that power is fully restored, I can access the rest of the logs. Ethan walked over. Find anything useful? She nodded slowly. Yes, and you're not going to like it. Sarah crossed her arms. After what we just fought, I doubt anything can shock me anymore. Dr. Patel took a deep breath. This wasn't just a Vorak. It was an experiment. Ethan frowned. Explain. Patel pulled up ancient Theraxa records. A video file appeared, showing a Theraxi scientist speaking frantically into the camera. The Vorak are dangerous. But what if we made them stronger? What if we controlled them? We injected them with a genetic catalyst, forcing them to evolve beyond their natural limits. The scientist's expression turned desperate. But we miscalculated. The mutations spread. The creature became smarter, faster. And then it killed us all. The video ended. The screen displayed one final message. Project VORITBR The room fell silent. Davis swallowed hard. So, that thing wasn't a normal Vorak. It was a lab experiment gone horribly wrong. Varun's face was unreadable. Yes, and now we know why my people abandoned this place. Ethan exhaled. Great, just what we needed. Evidence that the Theraxi play God just as badly as humans do. Sarah rubbed her forehead. At least we killed it. That's all that matters. But Varun's expression darkened. No, that is not all that matters. Everyone turned to him. Varun pointed at the logs. Look at the last entry. Dr. Patel scrolled down. Her eyes widened. Sarah leaned in. What does it say? Dr. Patel read aloud, her voice shaking. Specimen 1 has been destroyed, but others have already left the facility. Project Voidbreeder has begun. A chill ran through the room, and it wasn't from the cold. Ethan's jaw tightened. That means... Varun finished the sentence for him. There are more of them, and they are already out there. The crew stood in horrified silence. The real nightmare was just beginning. The bunker was silent. Too silent. The air was cold, the walls covered in frost from the thermal containment system. The Voidbreeder, the monstrous Vorak mutant, lay shattered on the floor, frozen solid. Ethan and his crew stood around its remains, hearts still pounding. But even with the creature dead, none of them felt safe. Sarah looked at the computer screen again, reading the last log entry. Specimen 1 has been destroyed, but others have already left the facility. Project Voidbreeder has begun. Her hands trembled. If this was just one of them, how many more are out there? Varun's glowing eyes darkened. Enough to wipe out entire planets. A race against time. Ethan turned to Dr. Patel. Can you access any more data? Something that tells us where the others went. Dr. Patel frantically typed on the console. I'm trying, but the files are heavily encrypted. Davis paced the room, gripping his rifle. We don't have time for this. If there are more of these things, we need to warn someone. Varun spoke without looking up. The Theraxi will not warn anyone. They would rather let the galaxy burn than admit they created this nightmare. Ethan cursed under his breath. Then we do it ourselves. We get off this rock. We find a way to stop them before it's too late. Dr. Patel suddenly gasped. Wait, I found something. She pointed at a file labeled Last Transmission. Ethan nodded. Play it. The screen flickered, and a grainy video appeared. A Therixi scientist, barely alive, stared into the camera. His voice was weak, desperate. We tried to contain them. We failed. The Void Breeders are loose. They are heading toward. The video glitched. The name of the location was unreadable. If anyone finds this, destroy the research. Burn it all. The Vorak were monsters. But these are something worse. The screen cut to black. Sarah clenched her fists. That's it. That's all we get. Dr. Patel sighed. I managed to pull one more piece of data. A partial navigation route from the bunker. I think it shows where the creatures were headed. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Where? She hesitated. A human colony. Outpost Sigma. Davis's face paled. That colony has over 50,000 people. Varon's voice was grim. If the Void Breeders reach it, there will be no survivors. Escape or die. Ethan slammed his fist on the console. Then we have to stop them. Sarah checked her rifle. We need to get back to the ship now. Varun nodded. Agreed. But the Vorak ship we came in is too damaged to fly. We need another way out. Dr. Patel pointed at the map. There's a secondary hangar deeper in the bunker. It might have a working shuttle. Ethan took a deep breath. Then we fight our way there. Davis groaned. Of course, because nothing is ever easy. Ethan smirked. You just noticed. But then, a loud noise echoed through the halls. A deep guttural screech. Sarah froze. Tell me that was a recording. Valruin slowly turned his head. No, that was real. The crew exchanged nervous glances. The nightmare wasn't over. More Void Breeders were awake, and they were coming. The final battle. Ethan and the others moved fast, through the hallways, past the frozen bodies of long-dead Therixi. The screeches grew closer. Move, Ethan barked. The lights flickered as the power grid overloaded. Shadows danced along the walls. Then, a Void Breeder leaped from the ceiling. Sarah screamed as its claws slashed at her. She barely dodged, falling back against the wall. Davis fired first. His shock rifle hit the creature, stunning it for a moment, but it was already adapting. Varun charged forward, slicing his Therixi energy blade deep into the creature's chest. Black liquid oozed from the wound, but the Void Breeder didn't stop. It grabbed him by the arm and threw him across the room. Ethan fired his rifle, aiming for the joints. The creature screeched, but then more came. At least 3 more Void Breeders crawled from the vents, their glowing blue eyes locked onto the crew. Ethan gritted his teeth. They were outnumbered. Run, he shouted. The team sprinted through the halls, dodging attacks, firing behind them as the creatures chased them. Then, they reached the hangar, and there it was, a working shuttle. The escape. Sarah ran to the controls. Engines are cold. It needs at least 30 seconds to power up. Davis cursed. We don't have 30 seconds. The Void Breeders burst into the hangar. Varun stood in front of the ramp. Go. I will hold them. Ethan turned. Like hell you will. We fight together. The creatures charged. Ethan, Davis, and Varun fired everything they had. The hangar echoed with the sounds of battle. Energy blasts, alien screeches, metal tearing. Sarah yelled, 5 seconds. One of the Void Breeders leaped at Ethan, but he ducked just in time. Varun grabbed the creature midair and slammed it into the ground. The shuttle's engines roared to life. Get in, Sarah shouted. Ethan and the others rushed up the ramp. As the last Void Breeder lunged at them, Ethan slammed the doors shut, sealing them inside. The ship lifted off. Through the windows, they saw the creatures screaming in rage as the bunker shrank below them. They had escaped, but they had not won. The fight isn't over. Ethan slumped into a chair, breathing hard. We're alive. Davis shook his head. Yeah, but so are they. Dr. Petal pointed at the nav system. We're heading to Outpost Sigma now. But if those things get there first, Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we stop them. Varun's voice was firm. It will not be easy. Ethan looked at his crew. Humans and alien, fighting side by side. They had survived against the impossible. And they would do it again. He smirked. Nothing worth doing ever is. The stars stretched ahead as the ship jumped into hyperspace. Their mission wasn't over. It was just beginning.